In Rise of Kingdoms at the moment, there is currently up to tier 5 units. You got your weakest at tier 1 and they gradually get stronger until you hit those tier 5. The most expensive but also the strongest troops. And over the last couple days, we've had some murmurs going around about the idea of tier 6 units. So in today's video, I will discuss tier 6 units, what they could be when they're implemented, what I think of them, what's their good sides, what's their bad sides, and finally my personal opinions. Do I think we really need tier 6? Do I think that they're not necessary? Would they be good for the game or bad for the game? So if you want to know more about the tier 6 and everything that's been pretty much the most hot topic of the last couple days, you want to stick around to the end of the video. Now let's start off today's video by discussing what tier 6 actually means from Lilith's perspective, what they've actually said about it, and here's the gist that I've gathered over the last couple days. First of all, when we're talking about tier 6, they're not talking about literally another tier of units. Like, they're not going to upgrade infantry, archers, cavalry, and siege. That doesn't seem to be their intention, and if it was, this would 100% be a video of me slamming that idea because it would just be very bad. It's making them even more expensive, more speed ups, all this rubbish stuff we didn't really need, but it doesn't seem like tier 6 would end up being like that. Lilith already knows tier 5 are expensive and there are already a lot of resource issues going around where people have to grind for ridiculous amounts of time to even fight with a tier 5 unit. So I don't think that's going to be the case when it comes to tier 6. We're not going to see some type of, let's say, a higher tier literally, but rather what we're seeing is the idea of there being another type of unit, something that is a little bit different. So for example, a lot of things that have been going around is the idea of there being a new age to the game. Now I'm hoping this doesn't mean you have to upgrade your city hall again and upgrade all your buildings and all that rubbish. Because first of all, I've done it once. I'm not interested in doing it again. I think most people can agree. They're not interested in doing more technology. Most people aren't really interested in doing more Alliance Center, hospital upgrades, and all of the shenanigans that go with that. And God forbid the castle. No one's interested in doing that. I think that's very fair to say. But the idea of a new era that maybe unlocks as you progress into the game. So for example, maybe up until your main Season of Conquest. I say main Season of Conquest because nowadays you get a Season of Conquest to begin with where you're not up against any like big kingdoms. So up until you fully hit Season of Conquest and everything's open to you, I think that staying at the feudal age is fine. I think that just makes sense. It wouldn't be too bad. And then once you hit proper Season of Conquest, you get access to this new tier of civilization, this gunpowder age, which is where I'm presuming we will see some type of a tier 6 unit. If it's implemented in this way, I personally wouldn't have a problem with it. I think most players wouldn't really have a problem with it. And it wouldn't cause too much of an impact on the game. It would just mean that there is more content that unlocks the further in you get, which I think is a very fair thing, and it's going to allow a lot of players to just get more content as the game progresses besides commanders, equipment, and armaments, because really that's all there is at the moment. But the idea of there being a new age for you to unlock by literally just sticking around in the game after you've maxed out your city seems fairly reasonable to me, and that doesn't seem like it could be very detrimental to the game, especially the idea of giving this age to all players. In that situation, I could see it being pretty good. I don't see why it would be bad. But that is what I'm currently guessing tier 6 would be. In terms of what the unit would actually do, well, after the feudal age, I'm not the most inept in like ancient history, but after the feudal age, I'm pretty sure it's like gunpowder and stuff. So I'm gonna guess some guy with guns is a good way to put it. Someone with muskets, probably. And then something along those lines is most likely what tier 6 would do. So I'm thinking Lilith is looking at adding another form of strategic depth to the game. For example, like when they added the range commanders, the siege range commanders, that is a form of adding strategic depth. These engineering commanders who aren't as popular as other commanders, but definitely are gaining a bit more popularity. I'm thinking that the tier 6 will be something along these lines, where they add a unique type of depth to the open field. Maybe they're not musketeers because we've already got ranged troops. Maybe something that can scale mountains. I'm not too sure exactly what tier 6 could do instead of just making a stronger troop, which no one really wants. But we could actually see something that is unique or something that is actually improving the game rather than just being a quick cash grab. And I feel like if Lilith did a quick cash grab in terms of tier 6, it wouldn't pan out very well for them because a lot of players are already against the word tier 6, let alone actually having them in the game. So if Lilith actually adds another tier of literal troops, it probably wouldn't end very well for them, and I think they know that. It would probably be worse than when they removed action points from the Barbarian Fort chest, or they limited them. So ever since that happened, that was probably one of the biggest backlashes I've seen in the community. If Lilith does tier 6 like that, I think a lot of players would just upright leave the game. And I don't think that's going to happen. So rest assured, if tier 6 come, it most likely will not be like that. But I don't know how meta dominant it would be, or in what way it would affect commanders. Would all commanders be able to use these musketeer units? Would it be a unique new would it be a unique new pair of commanders that gets thrown in on top of all the other commanders that are currently in the game? Would it be a way to upgrade your units? No idea how that could work, and we are still waiting really to see anything extra, because at the moment all these tier 6 stuff is just theories, and we're not 100% sure what it could actually become. That being said, I've spoken about quite a few things to do with tier 6 and how they might be implemented. So what are some of the positives behind adding tier 6 to Rise of Kingdoms? And I've touched on a few already. The idea of there just being more content for you to unlock for free, if that's the case, and the idea of just having a bit more strategic depth. That could be something that a lot of players want, even though that can be a bit of a disadvantage, and I will talk about that soon. But those seem to be the two main things for tier 6. On top of this, I feel if Lilith adds tier 6, there's going to be an incentive to make tier 5 or tier 4 slightly cheaper, just because you would expect tier 6 to do more damage or something along those lines. Especially if Lilith is moving towards what Call of Dragons is, where getting trades is important and getting kills is important, sure, but when it comes down to fighting in Call of Dragons, there is a lot more than just slamming your troops into your opponent's troops, especially when it comes to the ranged commanders, which in Call of Dragons are the most important troop. Like, most free-to-players will become a ranged and not a melee player. That being said though, Rise of Kingdoms, I think the community has this really ingrained culture of you need to get this many kills, you have to get this many deads, you have to have this many resources spent. Stuff like that is really, really big in Rise of Kingdoms. And if we see a shift in terms of commanders that do range attacks like this and get really big trades if you don't dive into the enemy murder balls, it could bring a lot of issues in terms of bigger kingdoms really becoming whale exclusive, because otherwise they're not going to keep a free-to-play low spender who might be doing a lot for the kingdom in terms of tanking tons of damage, fighting really hard, whatever it may be, but they're just not getting those 7-win numbers because maybe they've still got these melee commanders who aren't as good as the ranged commanders. So that is something we could see coming to the game, but it also could be nice in terms of some more strategic depth. I mean, ranged commanders add a whole new form of depth, like this guy here who's just sitting in the back, literally picking off random enemies. He is the most valuable player, some may say, or some might say the least valuable player. So it definitely adds a lot of depth in that regard, and it is quite interesting to see how these ranged commanders have been evolving. As you can see though, they are very outnumbered. Most people don't run ranged commanders nowadays. It is a very rare sight, and whenever they get caught out on the field like this guy is right now, they do tend to get really wrecked. So that is something that kind of evens out the playing field. But if we see a lot more range units in terms of a tier 6, this could mean a bit of a bigger shift towards more ranged combat instead of the up-close fighting that Rise of Kingdoms currently is. So now this brings me on to some of the possible disadvantages of tier 6. And I think the first one is maybe a bit of overcomplication of the game. One of the very good things about Rise of Kingdoms, and this is my opinion here, so feel free to let me know in the comments what you guys think, it is a very, very simple game, and a lot of people enjoy it for that. The idea of just walking your troops into enemy troops and fighting. That's just the real main idea of Rise of Kingdoms. And of course, there is other strategic depth. You can do rage chaining, you can do rage positioning, so you can get your AoE to hit more, you can predict when to run and when to attack, you can fight on and off territory, you can build flags in certain territories. All of that stuff is amazing in Rise of Kingdoms, but at its most fundamental, any noob could just come on with a big account and start slamming troops into somebody. It really does not matter, and they're still going to work pretty much the same as someone who's really micro-optimizing. Of course, if you know all the fighting mechanics in the game, you will get a better trade, you will do better overall, but if you can just slam troops into your enemy, even with a normal free-to-play account, if everybody's doing it, it will eventually work out. It's really as simple as that, and that is Rise of Kingdoms combat, truly in a nutshell. And I think that simplicity with having full control over your troops is definitely a nice thing in Rise of Kingdoms. Being able to just attack anyone you want at any time. There's not much strategy always required. Of course, you can ball up, move with your kingdom. All that stuff is good. But even then, you don't really need to use your brain that much when you're moving with your kingdom. Just stay in the ball and attack your opponents is really as far as it goes. And there's nothing like, all right, I have to stay behind this territory, or with the murder moves, I constantly have to reposition my marchers. You usually move with the murder ball, and whoever doesn't usually dies. It's just as simple as that. So this simplicity in Rise of Kingdoms, I think, is one of the main selling points and something I personally love about the game. And I think that adding a lot of these range commanders or adding tier 6 that could bring a whole new mechanic might overcomplicate it for something that's not really needed. There's a very good saying, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And I think that is kind of the same here. Open field combat, I don't think anyone's ever really complained about its simplicity because it is still fun. If it was boring and it's like, oh, I have to just slam my troops in the enemies, then I'd be like, yeah, sure, but there's a lot on the line. You've got your whole march on the line. You could take deads if your murder ball gets too far out. You've got a lot of resources on the line. Your kingdom's fighting and winning is on the line. So it's not like you're just fighting for no reason. There is a motive behind it. You want to try and win. So this simple fighting can still definitely work out. And it also just allows a more casual form of playing. You don't necessarily have to be fully locked in to be cracked at Rise of Kingdoms. You can still work it out and you can still get decent trades by just playing fairly casual, coming out of your city, going in the murder wall for a bit, then you maybe get your marchers sent back to your city, or you walk back and you play how you want, really. But adding this extra strategy could just be really trying to fix something that is not broken. Of course, like I said, if Rise of Kingdoms combat was broken, sure, change it up, add something new, but I don't know if there's anyone that really dislikes the open field combat. I haven't really met anyone that's like open field combat sucks. Most people seem fairly content with it and still find it quite fun, even many years on, especially with new commanders, rallies, there's the flags. There's never really one fight that is the same as another. They're always different, always something changing on the field, and it's ever evolving. So I don't know if it's completely necessary to add this extra layer of complexity in the open field fighting. That is really what the main belief I have is about Rise of Kingdoms in terms of the open field. Adding this extra layer could be detrimental. So now that we've gone over the advantages and disadvantages of tier 6 units, or the possibility of them, what is my personal opinion? Do I think we need them? Do I like the idea? And honestly, I would say I'm slightly leaning towards the idea of we don't really need them, and there's other stuff that could be a little bit more interesting. Tier 6 units obviously wouldn't be the worst thing if they're free and they're not difficult to access and they're not locked behind upgrading all of your buildings again. Stuff like that, if that's just not the case, they'll be fine. I wouldn't see any issue with them. They're just an extra addition to the game, and they wouldn't really change too much for the average player who's just not interested in them. Me personally, obviously, I'm not going to even touch tier 6. I'm an Archer purist account. I don't care about tier 6 units. I'm not interested in tier 6 units. But if they add tier 6 units in a way that is, you need to get a whole new level of technology and you have all these extra stats which you have to add and they work with all your marchers and your city can go up to all these new levels and there's stuff like better training speed for your normal troops and there's more hospital capacity and more resources. All of this stuff would make it nowhere near as fun. That's just as simple as that. And if that's the case and Lilith is considering that, which we don't know, if they are, I'll just put a straight out no, don't do it. It's a bad idea and we really don't want it. But if it is a case of it's free, it's just an update to add extra content, I don't see a very bad reason behind it. Me personally, I'm not a big fan of it just because, like I said, I like Rise of Kingdoms being a very simple game. But if you like that strategic complexity, then tier 6 would be the perfect thing for you. If you love ranged command and the extra depth they bring to the game, they're awesome. Tier 6 is amazing and I wouldn't say there's anything wrong with it. If you're more like me and you like the simplicity of the open field and you like those basic fights, then tier 6 might not be the best option for you depending on how they're implemented. That being said, of course, we don't know how they're going to be implemented, so it's kind of hard for me to bring an opinion. But like I said, I don't see a very big need for the tier 6 units. Most players aren't too interested in the idea, and just the mention of tier 6 turns off most of the Rise of Kingdoms community. The mention of tier 6 in a new age makes everyone cringe and say that's a horrible idea, and the second someone mentioned it on my live stream the other day, I think I had 6 people saying if tier 6 came out, they'd quit the game. And for me personally, if tier 6 did come out and they were in a capacity where it really severely impacts you if you don't use them, the reality is I would probably just migrate to a C or a D seed kingdom and kind of take a step back from actually playing the game and mainly just focus on making content and unlocking newer commanders. That would be the full truth of it for me. I don't have the money to spend on getting tier 6, and it would take me about, let's say, another half a year or so if they were in any capacity similar to unlocking tier 5. So I wouldn't be spending extra money personally. I'd just go to a weaker kingdom and I'd stay there until I could unlock those tier 6 and be competitive again. But I know a lot of people wouldn't be interested in it, and if I didn't have the incentive of making content, which is my actual job right now, I probably would have just quit the game if tier 6 end up being somewhat like how tier 5 are. That is pretty much the truth behind it, and I know a lot of people are thinking that. Hopefully that's not the case, and there's a very good chance that isn't, because Lilith doesn't want to anger that much of a community by adding tier 6 units in that way, so I don't see that being the actual thing. But if they do add them like that, or they make them pretty much compulsory to run, I don't know if I would be the biggest fan, especially with my whole entire account built around archer commanders and archer equipment. If that suddenly becomes useless, my account would pretty much be completely worthless. Now again, I don't think Lilith is going to do something that rash, adding a whole new type of troop that is a must run, and if you run anything else you get wrecked, and all your equipment and talents and skills and commanders become useless. Highly doubt it. Don't see why they'd do that. I wouldn't see a reason behind doing that, and it would just ruin the game. So that's definitely not on their agenda, but if something outlandish like that were to happen, I know a lot of people would be very upset with it, and I would be one of those. But that being said, if they add tier 6 in some way where they're free, easily accessible, and the new age is not too impactful on the progression of your account, and the just ability to open field fight, I would be perfectly fine with it, and I don't see a reason why anyone should say anything else. If they are just a free thing with extra content, then it would be perfectly fine for the game, as long as it doesn't make the open field imbalanced, or makes it too complicated, or even just ruins it entirely. As long as they manage to balance it, and Lilith is always very good at balancing from what I've seen, there hasn't really been many commanders who are way too overpowered. There's never been one troop type that's literally the only troop type you ever see. Yes, every troop type's had their heyday. Cavalry were meta, archers have been meta, infantries have been meta, but they've never been so good that you can't run anything else. So I think that's the same for troops. Lilith is really good at balancing in Rise of Kingdoms. They never really mess anything up too severely, and I don't think tier 6 would be in a different boat. They will probably be in the same boat where they're fairly balanced, they work out pretty good, and they just add extra fun content to the game. So now that we've made it to the end of today's video, I want to ask you guys for a small favor. And that is, tell me in the comments what you guys think about the idea of tier 6 units. What do you think they could be? Because again, we don't actually know what they are. Do you think they could be good for the game? Do you think they're absolutely horrible for the game? Whatever you think, let me know in the comments down below. I'll read every comment. I respond to every comment. Try to keep it civil. Let's not just be completely aggressive and say screw Lilith, screw tier 6, and screw this game. Try and keep it in a more balanced perspective like I tried to do in today's video. And let me know if you think I kept my perspective balanced, which was my goal today. So let me know in the comments all that stuff. I do very much appreciate all the comments you guys give, and I read and respond to pretty much every comment within like 3 to 4 days. So I appreciate all the comments. It's always very fun reading them, and it definitely does help me be more informed when I make these videos. Now, I just want to say thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.